If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers Podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Studio 26. This is the Interesting B2B Marketers Podcast. Today I am joined with Tim Hughes. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, all right, we are going to jump into the best part of the podcast. I'm a little biased on that because I always like the case studies. But before we jump into case studies, tell us about who you are in 60 seconds.
I'm a salesperson. I've been in sales for 25 years and I work for a particular big US company, software, high tech. And back in 2014, I came across this thing called social selling. And then I've been building on it ever since. So my first book came out in 2016. And not long after that, I started my own company with my business partner, Adam Gray. And we've been running DLA Ignite and transforming sales teams and companies since then.
Awesome. Love social selling. It's super powerful. I mean, it's always fun to see organizations go through that migration of the usual tactics to then leveraging online to build trust and enables the sales team. So awesome. Let's just jump into that. And the case studies today all fit under that umbrella of social selling. So it's nice that there's a common theme.
Yes.
The first one that you're going to walk us through has to do with, I'll just call it the what can happen in 6 months, right? Like when it comes to implementing change, right? So excited for you to share the first case with us. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you've got sales team, classic situation, little pipeline, not sure what they're going to do going forward. The current mechanisms that they're doing, which are, cold calling, probably doing a little bit on LinkedIn, sending emails, just not working anymore, and actually investing in using social selling and having a methodology to underpin that. So not going onto LinkedIn and messing about, but actually having a structural program underneath that can actually help them drive the change. Number of issues associated with any program of changes. People are going to have to do things that they may have not done before. It's going to take them out of their comfort zone. They may need to unlearn some things. They may need to stop doing some things. We get a lot of people coming to us saying, we don't have time for that. And it's like, well, you need to do something where you're actually generating rather than spending time. One of my equivalent of an SDR basically said, they need to be spending their time having meetings rather than spending their time doing nothing, as in generating them. So the thing is often with social is that people see it as what's been seen as being best practice is in effect, you just go on social media and everyone's allowed to go on there and willy-nilly and no one's actually given any support. Now we actually know, from the way that we work, whether it's diversity training, inclusion training, health and safety training, that what we need is we need to show people what is good and what is bad and explain to them what needs to be and how they need to be supported. And one of the things that people miss out on is to change. So we quite often get asked, can you come and talk to us for 2 hours about hints and tips on social media? It's like, well, that's going to do nothing. This is we're in the 5th industrial revolution. And a 2-hour meeting on hints and tips isn't going to impact your business that's affected by the 5th industrial revolution. What you need is a process.
Yeah. So tell me about, I've been in this situation myself before where it is viewed as like a nice add-on as opposed to like a full shift in how you do that. And the biggest thing I always bring up is I'm never going to say like, well, you shouldn't be doing all these meetings. You need those meetings, but the scale and reach that you can get by spending 30 minutes online, if it's like once a day, you're reaching hundreds or thousands of people. And it still fascinates me how some clients just view it as like, yeah, but it's on the side. And it's like, no, it has scale enough so that if done well, you're way more efficient. So what are you seeing similar themes as it relates to like that organizational culture change?
We get a lot of people saying, we're social selling already. And you say, well, are you getting these as particular results? And they say, well, no, we're not. It's like, okay, well, maybe you're not doing it properly then. I mean, what we found is, when social media came out, no one really knew what to do with it. So they gave it marketing, and marketing basically put it in a box in a cupboard. And every week or so, they take it out and they basically put a post out and say, can you go and like that? And that's probably generating zero benefit for them. So they're getting no ROI for it. And therefore, if you're going onto social media, if you're doing anything in sales and marketing, there has to be a return on investment. And there has to be a challenge coming down from from senior management saying, okay, so all of this money that we're investing in social media, what are we getting in return? And while we can look at likes and clicks and stuff, there has to be ultimately a revenue, a gain from this.
Yep.
So for example, the classic example is people think that social media is about going and posting. It's not. Social media is about conversations, because everybody who's been on your podcast, Steve, whatever they do in B2B marketing has to have a conversation to sell something. So,
Yep.
I mean, if you're not having a conversation, then you can just put it on your website and say, well, we'll automate it. Social media is about having conversations. So this is about how can we get the sales team, it may even be the marketing team, or even the HR team, or even employees across the organization, using social media as a way that's going to drive conversations, that's ultimately going to drive us revenue. And that's a big difference.
Yeah. Take us back to the case. Like, what was the mindset of the leadership team that you were working with? How did they go into it? And then where did you eventually help them get to?
Like a lot of clients that we come across, there's a skepticism about social media because it's seen as being, people are posting their pictures of lunch, or it's seen as being political, or it's being seen as demonized in some sort of shape or form. So first and foremost, you always, the classic crossing the chasm, you're having a conversation with people about saying, this is how people are doing it already. This is what a good business looks like. And so those conversations then are about building consensus within the organization to make sure that they actually understand what this is about. This isn't about wasting time on social media and fluffy stuff and posting flowers on your LinkedIn profile. This is about having a mechanism to generate revenue just as much as any other process, whether it's cold calling or email. You go through a number of steps and you expect to get a return. And that's what we've done with this particular case study. And what we always do is we always run a pilot.
Yeah. When I've done similar programs, I'll stereotype and say I put people and say people, the sales force, into three groups. The first is all about, I love it. I'm already in. Thank you for making this more of a priority. Then you have another group, I call them the fence sitters. So the middle third is like, I've heard of this. It's probably good, but I'm a little unsure. And then you've got the third who are just like, I don't really believe in it. It's not a good use of my time. Do you see the same patterns? Are there other groups?
Absolutely. It's as if you what I was going to say. Yes, absolutely. And what often happens is that we get people being put forward for a program because they're the sales director's mate. They are currently active on social media, or they think it's a good idea. And none of those necessarily will actually show that you will be successful at the end of the program. Quite often, people who are active on social media at the moment don't necessarily, and it's a sweeping generalization, I'm not saying this is about everybody, but quite often some of those people will actually say, well, I'm doing it already. I don't need to learn it. And so what we do is that we always, as we go through the process, is that we have a standard, this is what social media and social selling presentation, which we basically give as an all hands call. So part of the communication process that any business is going to be running, they need to be communicating saying, this is what we're going to do and why we're doing it. So we get a senior leader saying, this is the strategy, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it works. And then we ask for volunteers. So that means that we break through that. We're not having to break through those three different tiers of people. We're getting people, and we're actually saying, going onto social media requires you to share something about yourself, because so many people think this is about going onto social media and sharing brochures or brochureware. And research shows that actually that doesn't get you anything, because research shows that people come to social media to be social. And so what we're looking for is people that are going to share things about themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first got into social selling, I was in the incorrect camp to say, no, it is about the organization's perspective, right? So I need to be communicating the things that are going to help me as a salesperson, or if I'm on a marketing role, they'll help get word out about my company. And I've pivoted now to understand that it is so much more about the trust and just, so much of buying in B2B is, can I trust you? And we forget that, because we default into like, well, here's my solution. It's the best solution. But ultimately, social selling for me is migrated into, you know what? I am open to sharing more personal information as opposed to just my marketing, philosophy. And you can see how that really does complement. And I say that because when I have some of my first conversations with potential clients for me, they come across as if they already know me. right? Like they
Yes.
already have a relationship as opposed, and it's so funny because sometimes I'm like, how does this person know this? Like they're talking like they really know me well, and this is my first meeting with them. So it's funny how that happens.
It was Brian Fanzo that said social media turns the first meeting from a handshake to a hug.
Yeah.
And it's very true. I get a lot of people that will come to me and say, I had someone the other day said, I've spent all morning listening to your podcasts. I went out for a run listening to you. I've been doing, and then we had a meeting and he was quoting the stuff back to me.
Yeah.
But the thing is that how quite often you'll have a meeting and you'll do this round robin. I don't know if you call it that in the States, where you basically all introduce yourselves. In a way, you've cut through all that because the person knows you already. And it's something that marketeers struggling with big time at the moment because they still think it's about brand. And a lot of them are spending a lot of money on it's about brand. But actually what I'm doing is I'm building a relationship with you, Steve. And if you change companies, my relationship goes with you. And this has been like this for 10 years, except that no one's been voicing it. And so what we're seeing is that relationship is a central part of a sale. Now, quite often with the term relationship, we think of, oh, well, there's Steve and I've known him for 20 years because I went to school with him, not you, obviously, but the relationships can actually be built very, very quickly. And, we only need to either have a very quick discussion on LinkedIn, which is a direct message DM environment, or get on and have a call. And we've already built a relationship. And what's happened in sales and marketing over the last 5 years is that basically the relationship's been squeezed out of the process. Deal sequences, they're a great way of squeezing the relationship out. So what happens is that traditionally when you sold 10 or 15 years ago, you could go back to the person and say, you weren't ready for this 6 months ago, but are you ready for it now? Whereas now it's, do you want to buy it? No, okay, well, I'm going to throw you in the bin and I'm just going to move to the next one. And that's one of the things that I think that people are definitely struggling with. But the fact of the matter is that we know Christian Ronaldo, you'd call him a soccer player, but I'd call him a football player. He has 7 times more followers than the top 10 brands put together because we're interested in Christian Ronaldo. I don't know what pair football boots he wears, but we're interested in the person. And when we come to social media, as this is not new, this is what we've always done. I'm interested in Steve and I'm interested in what Steve does and what Steve thinks. Now, I know that Steve probably sells something, therefore I will take that on board. I know you're a salesman, but ultimately what I'm interested in is Steve's into barbecues or Steve's into hockey or Steve's, because what I'm looking for are people that are like me as a buyer.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you alluded to is what I call the barbecue test, is that you're going live, you've brought a product, you're going live, it's the weekend. And always, with software implementations, things go wrong. And it's a part of it, but it's about whether someone will sort it out. And what we're doing is that we're looking online and we're going, is this person, when I phone them on a Saturday and they are going to a barbecue, are they just going to push my call to voicemail? Or are they going to pick it up and basically step back and say, I'm going to put my beer down and I'm going to come and help you? And that's what we're looking for buyers. I'm not talking about transactional things, but in a B2B enterprise where you're still making transactions of hundreds or millions of dollars, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. All right. So here's my question on, we've covered the humanity side of what the content is, right? You're getting to know me as a person. When do people cross that line? And I say that too, there's also another element of like the LinkedIn algorithm, which has also shown that the more emotion driven you are, the more dramatic you are, you tend to get traction, right? Because people see the story, they have an emotional reaction, it gets seen by more people. When do you not go there? Because that's one of my pet peeves is always these big dramatic posts that sometimes feel fabricated because people are just, they're whipping up this emotional connection. So that's my thought to you is like, at what point do you dial it back?
I think, there's some people that have made a very big following by putting out dramatic posts. So obviously that there's a recognition that maybe that works. And I think what happens is that some people go, well, I'll have some of that, and then try and copy it. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to be, what people are looking for is someone that's authentic. So if for example, if something isn't you shouldn't be doing it. The only USP, unique selling point that you have for any business now is your employees. Because, if you take, the MarTech 10,000, there's 10,000 products that are exactly the same. Now, someone may come onto your podcast and say, yes, but mine is different because of this very, very small bit. Yes, I totally understand that. But the buyer isn't sophisticated to understand that.
Yeah.
What the buyer sees is this across LinkedIn. It's this amorphous of everybody that's the same.
Yeah.
And therefore, what they're looking for is something that's actually going to stand out. And that thing, that unique piece is you. Now, I often say to brands, when we pick up our phone and we basically go through our LinkedIn timeline, what we do is we go boring, 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 boring. That's interesting. Your job is to be that's interesting. And every brand I talk to say, yeah, that's us, that's us, us. Okay, right. Well, yeah. And we can measure that by how many likes and comments that you have. Now, that's not likes and comments of people within your organization, because they're going to do that based on likes and comment because their mortgage is backed on that. And they probably don't have big network, which is an issue that businesses have. But for us to get digital resonance with people, that's where we're basically people are liking it, who may be in our network, but even better are outside of our network. Because one of the things that we should be trying to do is selling through our network, is actually getting people to like and comment on those posts, because at that point, we can see that there's something here. They obviously, they feel that there's a connection going on. And so my answer to you is, well, one of my case studies is about somebody who got a lot of traction, but there's a revenue response to it. But, whatever we're doing on social, what you'll find is that there will be people out there that will get a lot of response, but they're not necessarily turning that into revenue, which is a sales and marketing organization, whoever you are, that's actually what your objective is.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Let's jump into case study number 2. This one, we're going to discuss the most loved and feared thing in the B2B marketing game, which is the telephone. So talk us through this case study.
Yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to do with this client was that they actually had, they're a small business, but they had cold callers. So they were used to getting a cold calling response. And so what we did is that we put them through training in terms of social selling, and then we measured the response. And so as of the 1st of January, 2023, what we've been able to do is have a number of leading indicators that are being measured. And this is leading before it would get to a CRM. So measure these leading indicators to allow them and say, right, each week, what are the responses that we're getting? And, how does that compare to what we were doing before?
Yeah. It's interesting too. I feel like the phone is such a polarizing channel, but to me, if you stage content the right way and you are genuinely a good fit, like you're providing value to someone. I've done some things where we've heavied up on an email outreach before, or LinkedIn outreach, and sending content that is just such a good fit for them, so that when you do get to the phone, you reference that piece of content, right? It's like, I'm the guy who sent you X. And then if it works, right, it clicks for them and they go, oh, and that I should come up with a methodology, right? I'll call it the O pause.
You should do. You should, absolutely. You need to add your name, like the warmish calling or something like that.
Yeah. If you can get to that O moment, you've just given that's a 5-minute permission window that they will say, all right, I know who this person is. They've helped, a point of view or something. And then, that's all it is. The 5-minute phone conversation needs to be hey, let's set up some time to have a conversation.
I totally agree with you, Steve. And I think so first and foremost, I'm not anti-phone. Some people think that social selling says, oh, well, we can't do it because we can't, this is not about transacting over social media. I've never said that. This is about using social media as a mechanism to get you more conversations and conversations at scale. And that is therefore, you have a conversation on social media, and the objective then would be to take it to a Zoom call or a Teams call or a phone call or something like that. But the difficulty that most organizations have is that they're still going to market based on one principle, which is that they create content based on a message, which is buy my product because we're great.
Yep.
So if you've got 10,000 MarTech products all saying buy my product because we're great, we can't differentiate that. And as I said earlier on, your differentiation is probably so small that I can't recognize that anyway. So there's a number of things that we need to be doing to make sure that when we could be making an outbound call, or even getting an outbound message, or actually getting an inbound call, then absolutely what we need to do is make sure that what we're providing, I'm going to use the word value. I don't like the word value because value means different things to different people. But what we need to be doing in that case is being very targeted and also actually offering them a piece of content that's insightful, tells them something they don't know, maybe even entertains them. Because actually we come to social media, one of those things is, and people still grapple with this, is they're actually looking to be entertained.
Yeah. So tell me, for this case study, where's the client today in terms of mindset from where you started with them to where they are today?
So luckily they had a very open mindset. We weren't really in a position where we were needing to go to them and saying we need volunteers. It was very much a case of them saying, this isn't working with what we're doing at the moment, sending emails and making cold calls isn't working. What we need to do is make a change. And so gradually what's happened is the averages have also gone up. So January was pretty average, but the averages and the leading indicators that we're getting is going up and up and up and up. And what we're able therefore to do is benchmark it and really get a handle on what is best practice.
Yeah. I'm going to go there for a second. So I want to get into the metrics of social selling. Tell me about, what are the interesting things to look at? I mean, like the shares, the likes, all that, the views, but like, what are the metrics where you can say, you know what, if you had to choose one or two, this is the metric to validate that social selling is a good fit for a company?
Well, I have to be honest. At the moment, what we're doing is a lot of the work is head to head with people, basically cold calling or email marketing, because in effect, those are our competitors. So what we're doing is that we're saying is that here is a different way of working, and we're using the benchmark to say, for example, this team are getting, when they were cold calling, they were getting 2 meetings a week. And then what happens is that when you cold call someone, your objective in that call is to get a next action. And what they were doing is getting 2 meetings a week. And of that conversion, they were getting a 0.3 conversion rate.
Yeah.
In terms of their averages now, they're now getting 11 meetings a week on average. So last week they got 25. And in terms of the next action, they're getting a 37.5% conversion rate.
That's nice. I like that it's a business metric, because I think the challenge is there is a lot of social engagement metrics, which inherently most people react to them as, yeah, all right, that feels good. There's some skepticism around that, but like, all right, I get the activity is good, but the connection to the business metrics is always the hard part. So I like that you described it as almost like a test and learn scenario where you could keep your eye on the same metrics and just see, by adding this one element of social selling, here's the net impact on the business metrics.
Yeah, we were in a particular, one of our clients. What we found is that when we went to meetings to present the results, so this is the first case study. Actually, yeah, this is the first case study I was talking about. What we found is that you would go to sales and say, these are the results you're getting, and they would actually want the results in a particular format. Whereas when you went to marketing, they'd want it in a different format.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing was coming up with a format. So in terms of the metrics and the first case study, the sales team over 6 months connected to 25,000 people. They had 800,000 views on their content. They had 20,000 interactions. Now, an interaction is a conversation. If someone places a comment or a like on your content, that's your opportunity to have a conversation. And that was what marketing wanted. Whereas when we went into the meeting with sales, they wanted the fact that we generated 2 million in pipeline, 900K in closed business, and they'd actually found an opportunity which was $500 million. That's $1 billion, not million. So they got a 47,000 ROI or something. But what we found was that what we needed to do was make sure that we measured it and provided the metrics in 2 different formats.
Yeah, nice. All right, let's jump into case study number 3, still under the umbrella of social selling. So interested to hear this one.
So with this, this was basically an individual contributor or an entrepreneur, and again got them social selling, having conversations, and understanding the fact that when someone comes to your LinkedIn profile, they need to know what you stand for. So if someone comes to my LinkedIn profile, and anybody watching this, they're more than welcome to do that. What they need to do is that they can see that I stand for something, but also what we're doing is that we're also sharing these things about ourselves. So for example, on Saturday, I shared a picture about, which was my family. I think I was probably about 5 years old on the beach in a place in the UK called Hastings. And it's a black and white photo that my grandfather probably took. And I had hair in those days. And I obviously had an interest in cardigans because I had a cardigan on. I also saw my mum and dad had cardigans. So we must have been the cardigan family or something. But the idea, but it's about this is me when I was young, and a bit of a joke about cardigans, etc. And that was about then generating a conversation with with my audience and my network. And that is what we find is that will because that's generate a lot of, or again, generate more traction. What you need is to have a mechanism or a methodology behind that to how can you actively harvest that. So for example, this particular post that I'm talking about was about a person and his son, and they went to the beach. It was during lockdown. It was the son's 16th birthday, and the son wanted to be out probably with his mates drinking, but he went to the beach with his boring dad. And that got something like, I can't remember, 185 likes. What that turned into was the individual, because they had a mechanism behind that, they got 124 leads, 6 C-level meetings, 2 proposals, and 1 purchase order. And it took him 10 minutes to basically do that post.
So just to clarify on something like that, there is no business tie-in. It is purely that's a personal post. People went to that person's profile, learned more about what they did, or like hell. I'm always fascinated by that, because I came from the world of like direct response. So I always, well, here was the audience, here was the offer, here was the conversion rate. But this is purely just an awareness play that led to business.
Yes. Now, what we're not saying that you put up anything unprofessional. We're not saying that a picture of me standing by the beach is not unprofessional. What you're doing is you're learning about me. Now, there's a particular senior leader that I know that puts loads of pictures of her. She takes selfies with her team. It looks to me as all she does in her life is basically stand next to her team members and take selfies. If I posted pictures of me on the beach, you would just think, well, you're obviously a surfer or something like that, which is why I say that you need to have different content that shows what you stand. But what you'll find is that when you put out a personal post, is that you will get far more response from it. And it's that when people are liking and commenting, is that they're actually saying, I like what you're doing, or I understand that and I recognize that. And that's about having that digital identity and having that digital connection with somebody.
Yeah. What was the individual that you were working with on this one? I'm going to dive into their mindset too. Were they embracing this from day one? Were they skeptical? Like, how did that go down?
They started off very skeptical because a lot of people will. The thing that we're taught, or I don't know where it comes from, is that when we go to LinkedIn, what we have to do is we have to write in this jargon, which is, I'm an energetic, results orientated, overachieving president's class.
You're leaving out type A.
And of course, we all, you're overachieving, I'm overachieving. We're all of those things. And actually, it's meaningless. What we find is that actually, if you talk about yourself, the more that you talk about yourself, the more that you share something that is, for example, one of our clients, the CEO, talked about the fact he got thrown out of school. But the story he tells is the fact that what he learned was being thrown out of school gave him the skills to understand and become a CEO. And what happens is that the more you lean into the story about yourself and show some vulnerability, show all the things that you would expect. If you were talking to somebody in a bar or in a pub or getting to know one of your co-workers, what you're looking for is understanding the full thing about them, not just about what they do at work. And what we find is that the more you do this, the more people will actually lean into it. The more you share about yourself, not repetitively, the more people will actually support you. Now, the second that this particular individual, this is the post that they got the most. The second post they got was about Led Zeppelin.
Interesting. Good.
Go on.
I was going to say, you're bringing up these themes of kind of like, you're in the bar, not at, I think B2B marketers are victim to thinking that the press release, like initially buying media or doing a press release was how it was done. And the press release format is always very buttoned up. It's like you're wearing a suit. And that's the comfort zone of so many marketers out there, is they just feel like they have to be uber professional and buttoned up, and there's a time and a place for it. But I think in social, my advice to people has always been, when you're writing it, pretend that you were in a coffee shop with a good friend. And would you talk that way to your friend? And as soon as you stop talking that way in your copy, you don't get it. People smell that as, this isn't for me, I'm going to tune it out.
We often get people saying, I don't want to share anything about myself. Okay, right. So you then ask them questions. So what's the best way that you find of selling to people? They say, well, I take them to a game or we go out for dinner. So what do? You take a bunch of brochures along and read them out. No, we talk about stuff and families and we get to know each other. I said, okay, so what's the difference between that and doing that on social media, but doing it at scale rather than one-to-one? Having 20,000 people looking at you and going, that's the person that I want for my next project rather than one. And that's the problem that people quite often are faced with, that they feel that this is I need to go to LinkedIn with a shirt and tie on, rather than actually saying, which isn't you. You actually need to go to LinkedIn as the best of you. And actually what we're looking for as a buyer is you to share your vulnerability. A massive friend of mine, and I'm quite upset about it. She went on to LinkedIn today and told the world that she's got breast cancer. Now, she's done that because she knows her network will step forward. And she knows that people will, I said to her, you're an inspiration. Because what you'll do is there'll be people out there that will have not gone for their scan. And if you can get one person from that post to say, I need to go for my breast cancer scan, if you can do that, then you've achieved something with that post. And so there's so many things that you can be doing with social media to make the world better. And, it's taken her 14 days to actually come up and write that post. But I think it's inspirational that she's done that. She's not done it as a way of trying to get attention. She's done it as a way of writing it in a way to connect with people and for her network to step forward and support her.
Yep. All right. 3 great cases. I love the focus on social selling. We're going to jump in now to Q&A. So tell me about your first real gig in B2B marketing. I say real gig because I don't know, some marketers are born marketers, right? But what was your first job?
Well, it's always a strange one, Steve, because my background, I'm a salesperson, and I get dragged into conversations about marketing. And probably over the last 7 years that I've run my own company, I've become more and more knowledgeable about marketing. Brand 24 said I was the 16th most influential person in the world around marketing. And I seem to have conversations with marketers, Mark Schaefer, for example, Ted Rubin, people that I admire, fantastic marketers. And I seem to be able to stand my own and talk to them. But I've always actually been in sales. So my answer to that is maybe my first job in marketing was when I started running my own company. Does that give you an answer?
Yeah, it's a good answer. I think having started my business, over 5 years ago, it is funny how you essentially have no official responsibilities, right? You focus on what needs to be done as the owner or the CEO. And you quickly step into what needs to be done. Is it marketing? Is it selling? Is it both? Yeah. What do you enjoy the most about what you do?
It's a really good question, Steve, because actually what we do is we change people's lives. A lot of people think that conversation is about training and coaching, and we do that. But actually we change people's lives, and we give them new skills that they didn't have before. And we've not done it so much over the last 3 years because of COVID. But in the first 4 years of existence, we did all of our training and coaching face to face. And I would always have people coming up to me and hugging me at the end of it. And seeing people, talking to people where you go into a room and they're all sitting there with their arms folded and saying, you can't teach me anything about sales. And certainly nobody over the age of 50 can know anything about social media. So this is a waste of time. And I don't know why I'm here. And for those people to come up to me and hug me at the end of sessions is just, I've been in meetings where I sit there and I'm nearly crying, because seeing that change that takes place in people is just an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And I imagine too, there's always, in any organization, there are the people who don't believe in it and they'll never see the impact of it because they are just entrenched in something. And I don't know if that's mostly to do with, some people are just naturally introverted. They don't want to take that next step, or they've been in a role for 20, 30 years and they've been taught it way back when, and this is what works. So I'm not going to change anything. So
I'm an introvert, and I actually love social media because it gives me time to think.
Mhm.
One of the things that I'm really rubbish at is sitting in meetings where there's lots of extroverts putting in lots of solutions. And I'm sitting there going, there has to be something that has to be something better than that. And I'm classic introvert, which is I think about it 2 hours later on after the meeting. But we're living in a world now where a lot of the leadership, and I'm kind of an age, this is the situation. My first job, there was a typing pool. And so we wrote letters and I wrote them out and I handed them to the typing pool. And we have this situation where we have leaders in place that are used to working in an environment where they may have not had PCs. I remember getting my first PC and we sent out letters. It wasn't until the 1990s that we had the amazing thing of email. I still remember doing my first email marketing campaign. And in that case, quite often people didn't have their own email. It was like a house email. So we changed and we have this situation where what happens is that all the way through life and through leadership is that we tend to think about all of the things that we've done in the past will help us in the future. And here we are, sitting in a world where there are so many things going on that, and so many crises that seem to be going on from COVID-19 to, that actually what got us here won't get us there. And I think that quite often I talk to a lot of people that this is what we've done and we've always done it like this. And it's like, well, it doesn't work like that anymore. The modern buyer, the modern job hunter, the modern investor. So your future employees, your current employees, your prospects, your customers, your investors, your future investors are all on social media.
Yep.
And if you're not there, you're invisible. And this is the big thing that they're missing. So, the average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social media. And when you say that to people, they go, I don't believe it. There's research that backs it up.
Yeah.
And this is the big thing that's missing, that we have organizations that are working in an analog world and they don't realize that we've moved to digital. Look at the changes that are taking place with artificial intelligence. 1 minute we have artificial intelligence was like, yeah, it's a bit of a cul-de-sac. We won't go down there. The next minute, if you're not using artificial intelligence in your business, you're behind. It's the same with social media. If you're not using social media strategically in your business, you're behind.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. One question before we wrap it up. I want you to speak to that person who's on the fence about social selling. And what's the one thing that you could say to them to give them that encouragement or the confidence that they need to make some type of change? What would you tell them?
My advice always is to give it a try. There will always be someone who will say to me, oh yeah, I know this person and they're killing and cold calling. Well, then they don't need to do this. That's not the norm that we see, which is why we always start with pilots in organizations, is to say, let's take a group of people and let's try this out and let's see if it's right for your organization. Any person now in leadership needs to understand what this is about, just as much as they need to understand what artificial intelligence is. We can't sit there anymore and just believe that ignorance is going to help us. We need to be understanding why things are happening and understanding why we're not going to do it, rather than just saying, I'm not going to do it because I know everything and I'd sold something 20 years ago and that's how I did it 20 years ago and it's still the same. It's not.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Tim, I really enjoyed the conversation. I want to thank you and thank all the listeners for joining us today. We look forward to coming back and sharing more content with you on interesting B2B marketers. So coming at you live from Studio 26. Thanks again for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.